Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay. Okay.
Aye.
Are there any members to publish here?
No.
If we could look at the minutes from last meeting. February 18th. If there are any changes, I keep looking at this. Only John changes. Let's see. If we're going to read the minutes, if there's any comments. Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, move to approve the minutes. That's what I meant.
Second.
Is that what I believe?
Second. So, wait, that's right.
Hi. It's going great so far.
When I was confused, I said, "That's not what I meant."
Oh, that's great, though. Okay, let's talk about it.
We have a slideshow that goes through and then if we want to do anything, text the comments.
You just saw that.
Yes. These are just each of the questions and then some of the major themes. The first question, what can Alex do to help support their role and responsibilities as a board member? Some of the major themes, the board members appreciate staff support. Strategic planning and goal alignments is a strong process. Staff memos and presentations should contain sufficient detail and articulate context. The board can play a big role as a community. Succession planning is an area of improvement. And we also look for opportunities to improve the CEO of that responsibility. And my question on that is this to improve the board's oversight of the CEO, or is this to improve the CEO? The hope there that I think we should discuss ways.
Laura, think about it.
We should continue to set aside time to ensure activities and operations continue to align with the strategic plan. And the action items were create opportunities for board members to interact with the public, improve succession planning, continue to improve board package details, and develop a process for CEO oversight. Any comments on this?
Let's spend a lot of time discussing.
Okay,
And I don't want to do all the talking. I just want to get people thinking. Opportunities for board members to interact. Right now, we interact slightly with the various civic associations. I don't think that's as deep as it should. Board, by the way, we're broad. Yeah, it's broad. I think the civic associations represent only a small slice of Alexandria. Homeowners generally, a certain age generally. I don't think we as a board really understand what's going on in this community and the impact of our rates on the business community. I'm sure if you understand the impact of our rates on ventures, the more low income folks. And I think we're going to be a really effective board. We have to open the aperture a little bit, a lot actually, make sure we get those inputs. So we just stop there and let everybody react to the things.
So we have a whole agenda item on community
Yeah,
stakeholder engagement.
so coming up.
I would suggest that we kind of like set that aside. I have to make a whole presentation prepared.
Okay, good.
Sorry in advance. I 100%. But I think we should, I think we should go through the rest of the self-assessment.
Yeah.
All the other topics, and then we have that on the agenda as item.
Well, I don't get no one other one. I'm gonna go through each action. Right, succession planning, I mean, that's my favorite. I have favorite. I think we've got to do, I draft succession. And the good news is we've got a great board, but I think the year ahead, the years ahead, I would like to create opportunities where everybody could be chairman for a while. Right on. By the way, that's why I want these committees to be almost self-executing.
So we've had empathy for you.
Yeah, absolutely. But for the good of this organization, because I believe the board should be thinking 10 years ahead. And the way you do that is to have a succession plan and a firing plan. So that is something that be more than just make it an action item. You have to actually make it action. What is an action? And then, one way to do it is take a vacation. No, really, I mean, that's how you do it. The pilot basically says, hey, back to plane, or a parachute jump out. Anyway, that's an idea.
That's what the Airline County Board does. They elect their chair and they're off, and a vice chair every year. And they intentionally rotate it among eventually every board member gets to be chair. Now, the downside is who's in charge of Arlington? Alexandria say who's in charge? Oh, yeah, the mayor. The mayor goes and everybody goes up. Arlington's given that to be a single person and shared governance.
And this is one where I think you all got to kick around some ideas, but this is one that I like, not done as good a job as I should. And I think we now have a board of such great strength that we can talk about things like that, like rotating, spout. But
I'm gonna tell you one, two, go. So if we have a board, this is gonna like this topic. This is not the need for board. We're going to do it. At some point, people all lines up in the mornings, but you can't. Well, unfortunate. See,
But keep in mind that to be an effective board member and chairman, you really have to know how to works. I think that takes a little bit of time. I think we should think a lot about what exposure are we giving to the board? Really understand all of the complexities. Not just the policies, but who's doing. How are they going to interact with the citizens? The real development plans would work part of this. But again, sometimes the only way to start is jump in the deep end. But anyway, again, not just an action plan, but action. Seems not offensive, you all agree. Offensive.
Yes.
We think the chairman of the government is.
We are seeking things for annual retreat.
This would be a good one. How do you grow leadership up? We're talking about number 4. We have been blessed with great CEOs. We've been blessed. But I still think we need to develop a more objective and defensible process for how we evaluate CEOs. I think that's a good practice. Good news is that great strategic plan, that's good measures, things that we can quantify or at least make objective. I think we've got to create a little more discipline around how we do that. I personally think grades are still going to be the same, but at least the justification for the high grade, something you show the public, you say, this is why you're so happy with what you should be that. As opposed to having less of that. That's another one where he's a little worried, but I think that's something you guys are looking at this. That's it.
No comments on number 3.
I would.
I'm the one raised it, and I think that, and, CEO, 6 months ago, and a little more explanation as to why and some of the details on what the recommendation is.
Yeah,
That's really what I was paying towards. And I think for a couple of them, we got into the discussion, we sent back to pyramid. Could kind of be kind of pretty thoughts on some more details we had in it, but I think we have the discussion about what about this, what about that? Some more written details on the recommendations, particularly procurement managers. That's probably more items in front of us that are more complicated. Include contract, it's multi-year, what is that? What is it? Like that's the reason. And partly I am coming from, having worked for 2 jurisdictions. You guys have all read kind of city council dockets where they go on and on. They do, they go on. I think you find the norm, at least in local government, this region, longer reports and explanations and recommendations. I'm not sure about utilities. Sometimes they're It probably is a risk. It's probably less of a consistent practice with them. But I'm the one who put it in because it's just,
But look,
that's important.
let's dwell on this. This is important. Mark, is it more paper or is it more discussion at the board meeting? What form is this?
I think that there was, I'm not aiming at having, I mean, whether there's more discussion for I think it's just separate, almost a separate topic. I think having a detailed explanation, more detailed than historically what we have said for the last 6 months have been looking a bit longer. I think at least the less questions. How does this work? What about that? If you get instead of one paragraph, you get 5 paragraphs, it's like something. But like, okay, now I understand it. Okay, so I think maybe actually less discussion. And I think for these reports serve not only us, but what the public record says was intent and purpose and explanation. So for the public looking at these, also the degree of which it's hard to say. You actually have to talk about, we just talked about a bit later, engaging in more in the community and having more of a, having people more understand what we're doing. It's one way of getting that. It's maybe more of a passive participation, but at least it's folks in the community getting educated. In regards to what we're doing, how we're doing, why we're doing.
So it is more documentation.
It's more, it is documentation, but I think the purpose of having the longer staff reports is its education.
Yeah. But the form it takes. By the way, and I don't disagree. More text, more slides, more depth. Because you're right, I mean, sometimes we're approving $1 million at a time, and it's
Something, another zero.
Yeah,
And it's,
yeah.
so, yeah, that's, and it probably, there's probably a relationship between how much money we're spending and in a sense of making a decision and how much of an explanation. For some things that don't deserve to be done. Some things that are major decisions to have more.
Let me ask you a tough question. Are you comfortable enough as a board member now to send something back and say this is important?
Well, I think we've done that with the Kermit. We did that. We did that based on, we just have, what about this and what about that? This is underfoot. And so we sent back. I think it reworked and I think we ended up with a better result.
Yeah. Because I think that's how you do it. Again, I'm not to have an action plan, you need to have the action. So the action is sometimes. No, I think the message is more documentation at times. But I think the action of what it takes effect is. It's on the folks. Let it back. Gotta be careful we don't come up time bombs.
I think there's 2 good examples I can think of over the last 6 months. One was the lease memo, the initial draft of the lease memo. Got comments before the board meeting and made that a lot more robust to explain the benefit and the intent. And I think the last one we did with solids engineer was probably, we had the sufficient amount of detail in there so you can see the big picture, not just what was going on the solids engineering and the solid program. So if that's the level of I think we're moving in the right direction now. That's the level we need to get to. I think that's achievable. Those are good baselines of what we want to be explaining achieving with, it's really, time and context. I used the words, I took Mr. Jinks's comment and paraphrased it, but sufficient detail and articulate context of why.
Good discussion. Can we go back to, number 2? Just to capture the action item we're going to do. What I think I heard was maybe make this a topic at item 2.
We could certainly frame a balance.
I wouldn't say succession plan. I would say development plans for the future. Not just the chairman, but the leadership of the committee chairman, chair people, and how we grow people.
There's, I think, 2 subtopics, Darren. You seem focused on one and you seem focused, or your comments are focused on another. One is succession planning to become chairman of the board or chairperson of the board. And then also recruiting new board members. So are we considering both of those 2? Seemed like you were kind of touching on different issues.
Yeah, we were. Because we're always going to turn them. And they're related. I mean, they're related. Yeah, the leadership of the board should be done. So yeah, let's put them together. Yeah. Good for.
So what things we consider the one nonprofit subcommittees that members on the subcommittees are not on the board. And it's a way of basically getting additional feedback and better decisions. So I think it's a committee level. And it's a way of kind of the farm team for potential future board people get on. I don't want to do this. Interesting stuff going on. Because some people are really participative, contributing members, and you're like, that's a great, you're adding to the, or, you're filling a more vacancy later, you go on,
That's
got somebody you can promote and will not come on, and okay, now what do I do? Come on, go on, recent, action.
There are no options for alternate. Come up with a succession plan. Basically, we have one alternate. They come to me within the same. They are really active. And that's why I like the idea. We talked about rotating. That's a good idea. James' idea, this is what I was thinking. I saw succession plan is basically to have a bench for people to educate them what Alex and is doing. So then they can understand what it is, what this organization is doing. From there, they can say, I want to be part of this, or no, I don't want to be part of it. Those who want to be part of it, they want to be attending, they want to be listening. And when we are having a stakeholders meeting with the community, with the example, we're going to be having this meeting of the CEO of Alex, maybe from the but that's what we increase the interest of the board and have people ready to serve, somebody.
what it also does. Creates committees that are bigger than 2. That was a very small size for a committee. That's a good idea.
And also we could consider a engagement. I was thinking, how do we address this? Yeah, people getting involved. Having them focused on, let's say, third committee on a particular issue or just in general. All of it's really varies.
A lot of these themes have come up, in, the different questions.
Question two, is the board engaging all stakeholders?
This is your slow pitch across the plane, you want that?
Well, I don't know if we want to do this now or, well, here, let's go through the slide.
Let's briefly, the board has other pathways to engage freedom that's talking about. Alex Shirley was effective in engaging those in the beach. You know, reach everybody. Outside of Riverview, the community has a very low interest in Alex Shirley. Board Civic Association presence is not representative of the overall community. And how do we better engage low-income customers to support the on the action items? Let's go through these one at a time. I don't want, and I'm still in what you're looking at, but update civic association representatives. Yes.
Right. Well, why don't we talk about this now?
Sure.
And then we can just kind of fold in the other agenda item. Well, let's finish reading the slide. Maybe, and then I'll give my pitch.
EPC and business associations. Identify ways to engage low-income customers. Find ways to connect with non-customers, i.e. owners.
So
So I'd add to that what John said, find ways to engage with the business community.
yeah, I think it's on the business associations. So this list of action items kind of got me thinking, along with the updated map that we have in our packet of civic association assignments. Let me forget to say. So it got me thinking about how we are starting this conversation with the how of community engagement, but I really think that we need to first talk about the why. Like what are the goals of community engagement, and are the strategies we're using properly designed to meet what those goals are. So I kind of did like a thought exercise. I didn't bring copies of this, but this is just my scribbles, but it's just as an example. So I first made a list of what I think some goals of community engagement are. And I came up with 5. I can tell you what they are later, but just as keeping it really high level for now. And then I brainstormed a list of, I don't know, about a dozen different strategies for community engagement. Some of them kind of citywide, some of them more geographically targeted, kind of different mix of in-person or written materials or online. And then I made a chart, right? I put the goals of community engagement that I came up with at the top and the strategies down the side. And I kind of marked off which goals I thought could be achieved with the different strategies. And I think this would be a good exercise for Renew to do. And then once we have something like this, then I think it's important to layer on which ones are important for the board to be doing. Because engagement is two-way, right? Renew can be communicating to members of the public. It can also be hearing from the public. And I think we all agree it's important for members of the board to hear from members of the public because it informs our decision-making process on all sorts of different issues. But what we need to ask, I think, and on what issues or in what circumstances do the members of the public need to hear from the board specifically? Why do they need to hear from the board chair as opposed to an Alex Renew staff person? And I think that's the kind of exercise we need to do to figure out where we need to plug in. We could then, pick out which one of these things would it make sense for the board to do. So instead of just jumping into here's our civic association assignments or starting there, I think we need to back up and do something.
Well,
Go through your list, you came up with 5 whys.
Yeah, this is just my,
Well, what's?
well, from one brain, so we should brainstorm together. But just like, this is kind of off the top of my head. So the first goal that I came up with of community engagement was, and this, when we had our prep meeting for this meeting, we kind of got into this, and why is it important to engage with the community? So the first one is just general awareness, like knowing what Alex Crew is and what we do here, to build just kind of general goodwill towards us, because people need to pay their bills and not oppose paying bills, right? So like, kind of just general information about who we are, like what we spend our money on, connecting the dots between the water treatment process and like having waterways, things like that. The second one I came up with was sharing information about specific projects in the community. So for example, like we're on Rivernew, we have the stakeholder advisory group for the people who were directly impacted by the construction in Old Town. I think we're probably going to do something like that for the Commonwealth Interceptor project. So with the purpose of that being to make sure people who live in these specific impacted areas know what's going on and avoid complaints and address any concerns that people have. The third one I came up with was behavioral change. Like sometimes Renew needs to communicate with the public to like get them to change their behavior, like, you know, don't flush this or conserve water, things like that. Like that is one reason to engage with the community. The fourth one is improving like accessibility of making sure people know how to contact us, making sure people know how to contact customer service if they have a problem or how to sign up for LEAP. And then the fifth one is gathering feedback on Renew policies and projects and programs, just kind of like but like I'm sure there are other, that was just kind of for the purposes of like this demonstration, that was what I came up with. And then here's the list of strategies that I described. Continued presence at civic association meetings, increased and improved social media presence. A lot of these we had talked about before. Facility tours for members of the public, visits to school classrooms, coordination with the Environmental Policy Commission, bill inserts and postcard mailers, and an annual customer survey. I thought might be something to do. Working with multifamily buildings to share information in the building, like in the lobby or something for people we don't build late. Here's a spicy one to throw out there: a permanent community advisory group, which I think might be a good idea, like the River and NESAG, but to a specific project. Like you could have representation, like a business rep, you could have a civic association rep, or someone from a nonprofit who works with us on LEAP, or just throwing it out there. All of the volunteer opportunities, like stream cleanups that we do, those are a good way to engage community members. The partnership with Alexandria Soccer Association, farmers market tabling, which I know you had said was not very effective, but I think it actually could be a good strategy for, like at the Arlandria farmers market, it could be a good one. So that was just like my initial but my point of doing that was just to come up with something like this, because like some of these things are really good at achieving some of those goals and really bad at achieving other things. And then I think a lot of them are achievable by the new staff and are not necessarily things the board needs to be doing.
Oh, a lot of good ideas.
Sorry.
Also join the civic association.
So like Mr. Hill was saying earlier,
This may
okay, sorry, more cash, we're keeping it
I
cash.
apologize, I may ask a lot of basic questions.
No, it's okay.
These are questions that need to be
Yeah,
asked.
that's good. We have in the past each taken an assignment of one civic association that we're assigned to as their liaison, to attend meetings and answer any questions that come up or share any information that is relevant at the time. I personally don't think it's a very effective way to communicate with the community, for a couple reasons. One is, as you said, the people who attend those meetings are not representative of the overall. And another reason is that it's like, it's not always salient every month or however frequent the meetings are for people to be talking to or about Alex Renew. You know, it's like, people don't need to be talking about the wastewater utility at every monthly neighborhood association meeting. So it's hard to figure out, I think, like when to attend those meetings. Or even sometimes you show up and people are like, thanks for coming, but why? So it's kind of an, I think, an awkward fit. I think it might make sense to just tell the civic associations that they each have like a designated board member that they can reach out to if they have any questions or issues, or that we can like email them an update to give at the thing if there's something going on, or if there's something really big going on in their neighborhood, like if there's going to be a disruptive construction project, like then we can show up. But I don't think the regular attendance at these meetings is a good.
While they expand into town hall meeting, city association. Yeah. And the topics, the board of topics that Alex Renew is actually, responsible for wastewater. Build. Help people who are struggling, basically customer service. Just having one town hall in each area once a year, and all the board members and the CEO of the party, and they give the presentation in public exposure. I know that's a lot.
It is, but I want to go back to Becky's original point, which is, let's get the why, right? Let's agree on it. Because I don't think we all agree on the why. I'm coming at this very different perspective. A lot of you are talking about us doing the talking, right? But either out to the board or out to the output. I'm much more interested on the input, the ear part, where we just listen.
I was having a hard time coming up with any message that needed to be delivered to the community by us.
Yeah, because we're not.
Like if you ask a random person in the city, like, do you care? Like, do you want a board member to renew? They're like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what does that mean? Like, they don't care. They don't care who's giving them the information. But we need to hear. We need to.
I mean, let me just take this one step further. The two most important things is set the rates and the strategic direction. And hire the CEO, hopefully, not on an election basis, but came up with a great strategic plan, right? And we're going to evaluate this team against this plan. If we're going to develop the 5 or 10 or 15-year strategic direction of an institution, of $1 billion institution, we should have inputs coming in from all of the affected stakeholders. And that's not just the civic system. So I'm more on the listening part, less on the talking part, because I think the professional stuff. They do.
Yeah.
You know, volunteers. But we should be a listening part because we come up with this. So, and I think that's why we were appointed by city council, by the way, is to be that input device on issues affecting rates and the environment. So think about input. If our only input are 5 civic associations, where are they?
It's like all the civic associations, which first of all, that's a little unwieldy. Just in terms of amount of effort required to cover all the civic associations. But a lot of them don't even allow renters to participate. Like some of the West End civic associations, like if you look at the map, they like cut out the apartment buildings. No,
Some of them include the apartment buildings, then say, but you can't join.
right,
And if you're renting the house, single family house, I think you can't join.
Right.
You have to be going back to 18th century, you have to be. Oh, yeah,
But the point is that we want to do what we,
that's the way.
the how is how do you engage people to know we're here? If we know what questions to ask.
Or I'd say, is it your meetings anymore? Or do we give, when the bills go out, as a pop-up? If you like to give your feedback on our customer service, at least many pay for bills and pay your credit card very often, you get a little pop-up. Do you want to take this, do you want to take the survey? So we can give some feedback that way. Also, I think there are probably, I know it's kind of the tactics that are on your list, but doing it, doing it online. There's a whole lot of it, not the whole. And maybe just get people who are really interested. I think one of the reasons, at least Old Town cities never wanted to be part of the meeting or explanation. We got to cover, their meetings are long enough. People want to get in there, get out. And the good news is River Renew turned out to become plus instead of highly controversial. The rest of it, okay, let's say it isn't a problem. And so they don't feel like they want to spend time taking time in a meeting. I know meetings are unrepresented, not only in civic association memberships, unrepresented, the meetings are even worse.
Yeah, right.
In a sense of narrow group. I could go to some of these meetings, I could name everybody sitting.
Yeah. Well, it's the same, the usual characters, and like not usually a lot of young people.
So, if you have questions about who you are, what we do, we'll have 2 board members in each town that is at set place, Saturday morning, 9:12.
But why is the board answering questions about what else? Do you think that's a function that we need to fulfill?
I would say, the board, I don't know if people are out there, but I think it is a sales and presence. It's the same, but not the same staff up.
If I'm a member of the public, I promise you, I don't care if the board member is at the town hall meeting. Like, regular people do not care about that. I really don't see. If Justin should, we're gonna meet Justin. But we're gonna do that.
The staff's presenting list.
Right, no, right. I think because, to your point a minute ago that, how do we get people to know about us, enough to give feedback? Those are 2 different things, right? The awareness creation and then the giving of feedback. And I think the board is receiving the feedback, but we don't need to be the ones creating the journal. I think in our role as a board, we should make sure that staff has a good plan for that and is executing that plan. But I don't think that we personally need to be the ones to do it.
I thought
Council members, we have meetings with their constituent. Can we get 10, 15 minutes when they have these meetings to introduce Alex New and make it public awareness? I think if their council is having a meeting, you have a lot of people show up. It's not only the city business.
Guys, we're acting like engineers, like.
I have
And I do mean that as a compliment. We are solving the problem and we haven't really answered the question. We're designing meetings. What's the why? I'm gonna come up with a statement why, and I want you guys to argue with it. The why is the board needs inputs that represent the full range of our stakeholders. Okay, we don't need to be, but we could be absolutely silent. we know it's having an impact? It should. We know that it was even needed. Take it. But we're all listening to the 5 citizens. Yes, or that. But how do we get input? So my why statement would be, I don't want to use the word engagement. It applies 2 ways. So just saying inputs. How do we get it? Why is we need inputs from the full.
Mutually dependent on each other. Because as you said, if people aren't hearing from Renew, if they aren't aware of what we're doing, they're not gonna have any feedback to give us. But I think our role is to oversee that as opposed to do it ourselves, and then to be listeners to, and to take that feedback and to integrate it into our decision.
Who disagrees with that statement? Why is we need inputs that represent the full spectrum of our stakeholders, not just stakeholders.
I think engagement is a good way to be thinking about it at the staff level,
That's that.
but for the board or.
Yeah. I do think because of the composition of the board, and we've got a lot of good inputs just because of who you are. Right? You've got the environmental expertise, you've got the engineering expertise, you know the city, you know your civic association, I have a 5 civic association. But I think there are whole slices of the city of the got to find a way to hear from that. By the way, that the hearing part is not us by ourselves, that we're not doing this stuff. They might set up a forum. Not setting up. Just thank you. Set up a new. You're missing. So do we agree on that statement, Paul? If I write it down,
Yes.
Before we all immediately forget what
you
you
know,
said.
before we touch phone, before we start designing meetings, so why? Reason for board engagement. Is to capture inputs, the full range of inputs from across all of Alex reviews. Stakeholders.
I was just looking at the slide that's up there, and the complete quote on the side. We get to this, it's about hearing from members. Yeah. So I think it's on us to decide whether we want to, what we want to do about the civic associations, and then think about what are some other, how we want to move forward with, like, other ways for us to hear.
Okay, about the civic association. Do you ever, in attending those, do you ever hear anything relevant? It may not be directly, like, input directed at Alex, but do you hear things that are relevant to our operation? If there, those kind of discussions going on? Yeah.
I did when I was at the last meeting of the Federation, and it was very flattering. It's very nice. They said wonderful things. Meetings they, I think, had with Matt Robertson about. So it wasn't from a civic association. It was from somebody representing a civic association who's also involved with a church. With his church. But that was about the only time. Most of the time you're just getting stuff out. But if that's the why statement, I think the next step, I think we need to classify our state. Some taxonomy. We don't do it here. But I think we probably should. Who are our stakeholders? Because our stakeholders are not just big.
So who are they? And then what follows from that is how do we vote? How do we hear?
How do we keep? Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn this back over to you. But anyway, I think the next step is we need to develop some sense of what are our stakeholders. Now, all I can say is it's not just civic associations, and it's not just rate.
I agree. And I also think another action item is to follow up with staff on working on some of these other ways to maybe reach members of the community from at the staff level on that more like outward communication. Or even just reviewing what they're doing now and because I really do see the two levels of as complementary.
Let's look at some.
Like us hearing and renew reaching out, like they're happening at the same time. So,
Yeah, I mean, for perfect solution, that's a good point. I'm thinking of all the good outreach that Matt and his team are doing. He's getting inputs. I mean, because he's reaching people that we probably know were there talking. We don't have to do. Let's do the same, let's do what Matt does with the.
no. We'd also be good to like have more of that maybe customers, like more.
So I mean, maybe this assignment to the professional staff. And that would be,
The assignment.
the assignment
Very
is,
broad right now, it's more than.
well, let me try to make it, let me try to make it precise, okay? The reason for the board, the reason for the board's engaging the public is to capture the full range of inputs from across all Valley Silver State. Assignment professional staff is identify the classes of state, groups of state, from your professional opinion, your operation protocol. Come up with a number that's more than 5 and less than 10.
Arbitrary.
We refer to them as.
Does it have to be-
I should be proud, by the way.
Yes, we have that, we call them affinity.
Affinity groups, yeah. Because I suspect that you think this way too. And it's, does that sound like a legit assignment?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to like work on this offline. Certainly, because I think I want to add to that. I hate to like work with people, but I would just love to see just kind of like a overview of what the current methods of engaging different stakeholders are. And then we can go from there and figure out what's missing.
Well, also, I think that would several, still, there's Mr. Robertson can be sure that he's getting back to us on things he hears. So we don't have the public in our meetings. If things come up that people are concerned about, if we'd like to address those, and they're not just 10 persons.
Might it also be useful if staff saying words, stakeholders, and what are the methods we're using? Also, going forward, what are the areas we want to put in? Rates, interceptor. Where else do we want to get feedback? What are our challenges, or where do we want to make sure that, if we just say broadly in general for an organization, okay, I don't want to get about that. But
Yeah, that's you're right. They need to be on particular topics.
That's the word. So Justin, is that clear enough?
Yeah, we had a plan to present a little outreach in December. I think we could have a bigger presentation. Make sure we discuss the affinity groups and what our current methods are to engage in the matrix. Like, bunch of-
I have the chart, matrix, whatever.
Literally the same thing you did.
How many?
I don't think there's, well, there's only, 5 or 6 groups and then some.
Okay.
NGOs, we're gonna have a bunch of different.
By the way, I think those kind of groups are important, because a lot of those groups, they care about the environmental, they care. We don't have a formal way to judge.
Find at least in some places you have the Association of Civic Federation, which then you get a lot of representatives, and it's a lot of folks who are there who are a lot of portions of civic, chamber of commerce governance, chamber of commerce, what do they call it? Government relations. Yeah, is interested in the details of policy and how the fiscal impact of what the government's doing and that they have. I mean, there are ways of getting it. And there's a council of human service organizations, which is probably 10, 20 nonprofits. Say human services department, the act rounds, get together monthly or every couple of months. So there are forums that already exist that affect is like we have this one, this one, this one, this one. But by getting one, you don't have one particular group of them and senses multiple stakeholders in the same time.
Like where this is going. We'll let the staff do the work. We'll just sort of give it a broad strategic direction. So my wife makes all the decisions, I just give broad. Cool. This was, I know we probably spent more time on this than we wanted, but I think we're making real progress.
Yeah.
Creating conversation. We're doing things differently.
Okay, I'll take.
I would also, while you're sitting there, look at how we've been sitting and talking to each other. I said, think about, do we want to arrange the side of the table? So that in effect, we can talk and have a
Right.
conversation rather than all staring at the beltway. I just raised that because we were all kind of angling to kind of to get so everybody's included in part of the conversation. And normally we're sitting there facing this meeting, facing this way, and not having that interaction. Push about team building. Push you should. Yeah. I mean, if you look at governing bodies. Most are face Fairfax are on, like St. Paul, some kind of little fur. So in effect, people having sat on this end for a long time.
So are you writing this down, new table?
No, you can do it, you can do it, just put these in an arc. These in an arc.
Oh, fancy bird.
Everybody can move back to the board.
Yeah, I think we are.
We'll make progress in our.
Question 3. How diverse skills, background, and perspective is the board? Major things. The board has an appropriately diverse skill set. The board is geographically or demographically diverse. Public health, community engagement, influencing and relationship building skills would be beneficial. The perspectives integrated into the board's decision-making process are about as diverse as the board itself. This challenge can fill all knowledge, skills, and ability areas for the vibrant board. Thoughts on this?
Would this be I know we're jumping around to each topic, but would this be a good time to go over the board composition matrix, since action item number 1 is to develop board composition matrix, which looks at how diverse are? Or do you want to wait?
I think I'd rather go through this first.
Okay. So should we maybe just kind of table diversity of the board until we get to that section of the agenda?
And develop more composition matrix, I think we've got that. And
That's coming up.
there's the board recruitment policy, so.
Very planning conversation. So I want to move on and we'll come back to this. Okay.
But we're good.
Because they're all connected.
Yes. How well do we know and trust each other? For major things, the board has a trusting working relationship. The board can do more to get to know each other better. Typically, the board has consensus on its decisions. Board members feel welcome and open to express their opinions. The action items create opportunities to engage with fellow board members outside of meetings, dinner, team building, etc.
So I want to highlight
Turning
that
the
quote.
tape, turning our.
Yes, turn the table.
Actually look at each other.
Also, I like that quote on the side, which whoever said this is a great suggestion. We can do a better job of ensuring that the board member's silence on a subject doesn't necessarily mean concurrence with the board direction. Like making sure everyone you're affirmatively.
Let's talk about the action item, opportunities to engage. Like, we're always constrained by this law that if we run into 3 people on the street, got to put public notice, we don't, penalize someone.
Oh, now. I mean, just like. She doesn't want to hear that.
We'll be discussing official business on the street,
Yeah, but
and there's 3 of them.
I understand.
But if we're this committee discussing business,
There's only 2 people on the.
only 2 people on the committee. And that that is a real hard. And if one committee is only got 1 person on it right now.
Yeah.
And I can't help myself.
Yeah, but the quorum is always 50%.
Right.
That's always happy or most of the time. I would hate to have each of you commit more of your time, because you're all busy, if you're not a happily retired guy like me. But I think we probably do need to create learning opportunities where we learn together in a fun, constructive way.
We're all getting a tour of the solids treatment process. Well,
I
I
think
work at 8 AM on a Saturday. I don't want to be more fun than that, you guys.
I do not recall having seen you laugh like this in the time you've been on the board.
Just looking at today.
You know, it's,
Yeah,
just-
good time.
I mean, it's,
The board meetings. are
this is
fun.
what we need.
And I think we can do it with these things, and I think nothing creates conversation more than doing something together. And I think, okay, I don't think we're the kind of folks that are going to be rock climbing together.
Speak for yourself.
I would,
That's how big the rocks are.
I'd be cool with it, but I think, given the fact that it's the board members, and we all probably need to learn more about our business, creating learning opportunities that are fun and informal are very. And it could be like a cruise on the river. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Cruise on the river. And pointing out sort of the environmental impact of what we do with our business. I think in the course of a year, I would be okay, and we'll get reaction to this, if we could schedule at least 2, in addition to the board retreat, 2 fun team building / learning opportunities that are a couple hours long. It could be right on there, where the biologist talks about what's really going on with dead zones and stuff like that. Or an exciting tour of the science.
We take biological sense,
Because we are a public school. Take a trip to Las Vegas.
Dixie Southwest got one of those nonstop lots out of National to Las Vegas, so it would be pretty.
I could just imagine the Alex now, catch
Yes. Next door,
next door, this picture of, yeah, Alexander Ford. Slap machine. But things that are educational and meant the kinds of interaction we're having right here. It was this common theme, but it's important. That'll just, that's just. It'll be nothing. And again, rock climbing or whatever, we could do that too, but
But you're looking at less program, more just ability to converse and get to know each other.
but around the feet.
Yeah, empathy, yeah,
Yeah,
but not long presentations from.
not long presentation, but also not happy hour. That
I think there, we have.
could have happy hour.
Solid store is coming up. That should be interesting. We just adopted 2 streams. So that would be out doing the stream.
which two?
What's around in Huntington Creek, the north side of it. Not Fairfax. Key building, back at building momentum was fun.
That was
We only did one little event there. And then we would have to go with the new board member, build strengths, do it, the strengths finding exercises.
Yeah.
Sally's here like every other month, that it's easy enough to schedule a board strength session with her, and she has a lot of fun things that she can pick out from the strengths that are interactive and cheaper. So that's not in addition to Ms. Waters' governance game.
I've heard a lot about the governance.
About basketball.
Yeah, let's play basketball.
As the shortest person here.
And we have the CBS boat tour, the Riverkeeper boat tour, all those things kind of on the list.
Good.
As team building activities that were initially centered around the retreat, but we can certainly spread those out over the course of the year, there's enough items. That was stable.
There was a time I was thinking I should take each of you out on my boat, and I realized liability issues.
You're just looking for just.
I would have to invite, we do something, the public has to be there.
They're all invited.
What did you bring along, guys?
Solid tours advertised on the city website as of today.
So anybody can come to that?
Correct.
Should I invite them?
Sure.
Better see who really likes.
It's gonna leave having Washington. So that might deter.
Okay, I'm not gonna.
But we do it to make sure we're compliant, not necessarily that we want to.
Says a little bit.
Yeah. But anything you want to do, we can make sure that we cover it with public notice. Yeah. Folks don't show up and if they do, we have to take them on the boat for it.
Okay, so we've been giving action to our staff. We're saying, on average, 2 events a year, in addition to the retreat, that are fun, educational, and not overly structured. That probably means weekend, right? We can get the soccer games and travel and everything else that isn't. It's a commitment. But be sure you're okay with it.
Only twice a year is no problem.
Fun, so fun. What I care about, we have actions, not action items, but action.
Right.
Cool.
Excellent. What topics should the board investor overlook? The major themes the board generally allocates enough time to consider strategic direction issues. Monthly discussions take an appropriate amount of time. Succession planning should be addressed for board members. The board appreciates being advised of long-term issues such as PFAS. The action items or the actions we want to take are in succession planning. Any comments on this?
Talks about that.
Present updates on sustainability, climate change. periodically review progress towards strategic goals, and spend sufficient time on monthly reporting meetings.
And number four, similar in details, talk about doing river earlier, something put down earlier in the agenda, so it isn't the last thing as we're putting our papers folder ready. And you talk about what public would be more interested in listening to. It'd be more of that than what we first do with the agenda. So I think, I don't know whether that, I don't know how I feel about the whole monthly report comments earlier. With these big earlier meetings. Yeah. That's important.
Is this your comment, John? I thought it was a good comment about. I think it could make sense to occasionally do it at the top of the agenda, both River New and monthly report, if there is an item in it that requires special attention. So that- And also just to mix it up a little bit.
One way or the other, just a little bit more time on it. That's really our bread and butter, right? We're 2 hours in the meeting, by the time we get to it, we're all kind of like, okay. I'm sorry. I like five. Are we thinking far enough in the future? I think we're so busy with what we're doing. It's all good stuff. But are we really thinking as forward 30, 40 years out? And I think we need to be as forward. Because these professional staff do a great job running the day-to-day and running the big projects, but do we really know what this place is going to look in 8, 60, 7?
I think the PFAS presentation we got was a good example of how to do that, right? If it's like, let's take one topic and look into the future about what's coming. And I think the suggestion, like the climate change suggestion, we get a presentation on that would be similar. Like more discussions like that, at least like longer term issues, I think be good to keep. Not necessarily every month, but it's beneficial to me, I could say. I feel like I got a lot from the PFAS presentation.
Now, we talked earlier about team building things involving education. I don't want to overburden professional staff with preparing too much stuff for us to adjust. Should we create opportunities for board members to go to conferences? That doesn't tie these guys up too much. There was a time where Bill Dickinson and I went to New Orleans. So,
I only with Bruce to the office.
I have to admit, when I went to one in New Orleans, it was odd. Just to see kind of what's going on in the Southwest. How they're dealing with a very different set of problems. She's normal. And if it doesn't take your time in preparing a detailed presentation, which takes time. It's also a great team.
We maintain a list of all typical conferences and track when they're coming up, if we intend to send anybody, but that's something that we can share with the board if you want to see what conferences are out there for.
It'd be nice, if there's 2 conferences, you're all members of WAF already, right? You got an email from them?
It's coming.
I just got my one.
Your membership is right inside.
You're gonna have 100 emails from Web.
There's the annual web conference, it's either Chicago or New Orleans, and then there's the state version of that. John will refer to as BWEA. In. Mhm.
Oh, the
Every
water
day.
jam.
So there's a local conference then, and then there's special. WEF does specialty conferences as well, if you're. There's sustainability. It's easy enough to do since you're already on the WEF to register for conference in fact.
The what the partnership is small profits, they pay for
Like, what weather?
Yes.
that. Yeah. So it's just one class. See professional. Doing the same business. The first time I think. This is the first time I met a member who was recruiting me to.
Yeah, board.
Yeah.
You decline.
It takes a while.
I mean, we can rotate every. 2 members every year,
Let's say that.
conferences.
Because I think we can't send through. We have to, like, public, right?
As long, as long as you don't sit down and talk business together.
But I like the idea of probably 2 a year.
Let's start local or national? Sorry, or both. This last section happened.
How about the legal deal? You know what, you know what the board does, and you know what our backgrounds are. What is the right context?
Well, we did conference, all conference. And that's why you all signed up, we signed you all, members every staff member. Like what other partnership or some of the other things are local too. You know, and that way you're getting the draw, you will. That's what I'm trying. Get the web email to get you registered for WEF, so you get the. Briefings.
The eye opener for me, I mean, working. How many different ways water structure. Some states have these tiny little utilities, some states have these huge utilities. How did that evolve? Are there advantages to one versus the other? You get that?
For you.
I can put it not on my.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. They got my picture by the door, I don't want to hurt it.
Go ahead. That's the interest, there's conferences that would occasionally address that.
I want to create learning opportunities that don't grow the burden on you. Tip the same, okay? 2 members a year go to this conference, that it's not a big burden. Well, then we'll do football.
Next slide, please. What you see is being discussed but never resolved.
It's my quote,
Fun question.
it's my quote on the right.
The ordinance that the city of, for stormwater and sewers will always be a problem
Yes.
unless we take it over.
Well, I don't see
I
that.
think it will be better. Alex renews role in supporting the city with their stormwater program. How to systematically address low income ratepayer households. Action items are tracked and completed quickly. The point I made on this was that we talked about river review. It seemed for a long time, we weren't really sure what we were going to do about it until we did. But sometimes it just takes a while to resolve things.
Like that's where we are with the affordable learning. See it on the list, but it hasn't been resolved yet, but I think we're making progress. Obviously, there are smart student issues there.
Let me. Give you a crazy ideas. Stormwater. Stormwater is the city's problem. And I really believe it's the city's problems. They've got stormwater fee, structure. But is there one narrow area where stormwater sanitary are stopped? Where we could prototype a new kind of relationship?
You have an answer to that?
I look at the fiddling around the city is doing. Fiddling around.
And with the Commonwealth,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
it is fiddling around. I think that's a case, maybe it's because it's my neighborhood. It's a case where the Commonwealth Interceptor is part of the solution, but it's certainly not the entire solution. It's a particular area where a new model of interaction between city and could be experimented. Because I just don't think the city is perfectly progress. But I don't want to own the problem either, and if I could do anything for free. What do you think? Just two, that's, we don't want to touch it. Go ahead, it's okay, maybe this is an informal meeting. So. Say it. There you go. Well, going now. Don't chase after it.
He's just blinking a lot. I don't think that's his thing.
It just, that's. By the way, there are certain problems in this world that cannot be solved. Like crime on the front. There's an organization, they have a little experience on the city side. I think if there's an organizational problem, it says if it's a matter of responsiveness or a matter of getting it done a reasonable time frame or making it a low priority. There are ways to address the city, council, and together, and headed excuse me, yes, various ways. Say, hey, this is what we want to do. We need to get done. Do it. And then do it in such a way that it's the timeline, here's the assignment of responsibilities. Yeah. So I think that there's, seemed to me that there's, and that may not work, but I think until we identify the problem and say what we think the solution, should be in order to get things to right the ship. Which is saying it's not our problem to solve. Work for the city to solve the problem. Well, I'm just saying is it's instead of saying, well, it's not happening, so therefore we'll solve the problem. I think that's. I'm not saying that. I think it's like, how do we work together, or if they're not working together, how do you, there are all sorts of ways you create you can create accountability, some responsibility, and oversight so that things get done. We got our stormwater program, got the fee increase. Up the fee, we
I just said to the staff, we're gonna have something, I want it by X date, and
But now we have to do the projects.
well, we had a list of projects,
But
but it's a matter of if things are made priorities to give it attention. Consider giving attention, get out.
Or do you think we'd be seen as minimally not involved in this? Want to move it forward with?
Given that we have got a $70 million potential investment for increasing the sewer pipe with one of the options down Philip Avenue. That's not meddling, that's just saying, we're in the middle of that, no matter what, we got a horse race. What's the right solution? And if there's reluctance for the city to deal with, they can influence the outcome and potentially make it so that what we have to do is disruptive or is expensive. Then, it's a responsibility to do that. I'm guessing at this point, but the problem be that maybe they just don't. It's just kind of like, well, we have enough hot irons that we're going to deal with all of them. That's their problem, even though for the community, this is one community. But looking at what's the right solution for the whole community, looking at all the ways to influence making that right decision. The engineering elements could be to get it done as cost effectively and least disruptive, and we can take us solve the problem. The bureaucracies are self-sufficing. Basically, they take care of themselves at first, and even though it's not in the interest of the community, and it's up for the leadership of the organization to try to get them to, I think, they clearly address what the right priorities are, the work they have to get done, and when they expect it done. When that work should be done, what's the nature of the work should be done. So I don't, it may be uncomfortable, but it's clear, I don't think it's meddling. We're just saying, look, we got this investment to make, we got capacity issues, and which the city staff is saying, yeah, that's true, it's a matter of, okay, let's do. We're not getting to a design solution that is the optimal one, that we figure out how to do it. We're going to be picking up the pieces on that after it starts playing out. If it hasn't been playing out, if somebody in this community is smart enough to figure it out, and okay, well, what about that? Get back to the drawing board. Costs go up because of time.
The issue separate
Where?
store.
It's separate.
It's in separate.
It's laterals, and which I've never done in laterals. That's privately owned, so and they illegal to put your rainwater in your sewer system. In the early '60s or something like that. So we've got whole neighborhoods. This particular neighborhood, where it is perfectly legal to take your rainwater from your downspouts and put it into sanitary sewer, and that's where it's going.
So the question I'm asking is, what is the issue? Flooding.
There's two separate issues. There's a stormwater capacity issue with stormwater system. And then there's also an I&I issue with the downspouts connected into the sanitary sewer system. That's the inflow piece. And then there's the infiltration piece where you got a line pipe and manholes throughout the city.
The issue is flooding primarily and basement evidence. Flooding.
What's the design? Pipe?
It's supposed to be, the stormwater pipe is supposed to be designed for a 10-year storm.
10 years.
There's a study in 2016 by the city that showed there are Many sections were undersized. Couldn't carry the capacity of a thunderstorm. And the government's 1984 might be different than a thunderstorm today. So I think, that's the issue. And our role, our project right now that we're investigating, it's a joint study that we're performing with the city, is to look at the downspouts, look at the private lateral connections, look at the driveways, the basements, calibrate a model and then figure out what the right fix is for the Commonwealth interstates that would help mitigate basement backups. What happens when it rains? You have all this water flowing into the sanitary sewer system that gets our asset, the Commonwealth. In addition to that, you have the stormwater system underside the same area. It's a bowl like Bloomingdale. All Commonwealth that way, and then you have basement backups. People's home. But it's a separate system. The picture Bloomingdale. But separate, and we just don't know separate.
Where are we trying to get to on this tonight? Are we gonna solve it tonight? Or not? Just looking at the time,
Yeah, this is what I think.
like, are we trying to never resolve this
I'll
issue
answer
tonight?
the question you asked, Mr. Hill. I think that, we have a potential play in dealing with the Commonwealth interceptor and addressing basin backups. We have 180 MGD pump station at the other end, and we're studying that, right now, going through the model for all of the different scenarios, both city and Austin, how we fix this issue, community issue. Beyond that, I think we have other issues that are probably higher for our mission that we need to address. And we're focused on coming up with regional solutions. Biosolids is a big issue. The capacity workforce continues to be a big issue. So I think for the stormwater, us taking over a little hunk of the stormwater system, when the ship has sailed on the rest of it, it's under design and going to construction. I think it's really challenging for us to step in at this point and do something different. And there are other pieces having to fund it.
So to answer Becky's question, I think we're done with this.
Moving on then?
This is one where I think we just go, this is the human condition. Yeah, let's move on. Move
Our last
on.
slide for this
What would make our
office.
board meetings more productive?
Talking about the issues that are never resolved.
Board meetings are very productive and efficient, and that's.
Demonstrating that tonight, yes.
The agenda and flow of the meetings are consistent and well received. Structured approach to governance committee is a positive change. Board believe decisions are evidence based. Increased involvement of staff has been a very positive step. I especially like the information only topics that don't require immediate board action. Our actions first celebrate wins and successes. I think happy hours are appropriate. Introduce your new staff and provide name tags at meetings. Follow through on governance commitments.
Yeah, give the action. I think we're good.
Celebrating wins this night. It's a comment I made. I meant like during the meeting, like if something good is happening, like let's get, it's like, congratulate the staff who are responsible.
Anything further on these?
Not bring up stormwater.
Right. Okay, so now we're circling back to the topic of the diversity of the board and our composition. We all filled out this composition matrix. So it's, when I was thinking about kind of presenting on this, I was thinking, generally, like, I was just wondering myself, well, why does it matter how, diverse the board is? And I think we'd all agree that having a well-rounded board makes our decision-making process more comprehensive and inclusive, more responsive to the needs of the community when we represent different segments of the community, more experiences to so I think that in mind. Let's start with skip the Clifton Strengths color coded page. I was just looking at the chart that we filled out. There's kind of three categories of information on here. Top two sections are kind of just like objective facts about ourselves. Yes, this thing. Then we've got the section where we were asked to identify our own expertise, and then we have strengths. So looking at the top sections, I thought it was notable that, I mean, even just the first line years on the board, we've got some diversity of tenure, but skewed towards new members. Demographically, we could be more diverse. We only have one woman, one person who isn't white, and one person who is under 60. And two of those are me. I thought the areas of expertise section was interesting. I think that's important, not just for thinking about like, you know, who's on the board, but also then where we need additional training and maybe hand-holding on certain topics. I think that's maybe the most actionable use for this information. I saw that none of us identified technology/IT as one of our top 5 areas of expertise, and none of us is state government.
Oh,
So those might be 2 topics where we need a little bit of extra help. And then there were a couple more where only like one person put it in their top 5. And that was investment management, wastewater operations, and nonprofit, experience with nonprofit organizations. So those, those might be areas where we, need to a little bit more help when those are salient issues. And then on the Clifton, but one thing actually before moving on from that, I thought maybe there could have been a couple other areas of expertise that weren't on the list that, like, if I was filling it out, I would have put in my top 5 that weren't options. Maybe that's on me. We were given an opportunity to comment on this. Yeah, that sounded really familiar. So let's just move on, actually. That's fine. It's a perfect document. On the Clifton Strengths piece, we went over this and we only have 4 of us on this, but we talked about this a fair amount at the board retreat when we actually took this. So I'm not sure how much we need to belabor it. But we are very strong on executive skills and strategic thinking. Less strong on relationship building and influencing. So we need to have Dr. Wan take the test so that we can get a complete picture of our Clifton strengths.
So most of the study our weaknesses and figure out how to answer questions.
Yeah, we're gonna rig this so that we really well.
It's kind of hard to figure it all out, but you're really smart to feel pretty fine. Just looking at that, the scatter diagram in the upper right. I think we need more orange.
The more blue too.
Yeah, but the orange is.
Have you taken strengths finder? Have you done Clifton Strengths?
It's kind of like a fancy personality test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think MBTI.
What sort of thing?
Can we have Sally work with Dr. Wong to get him
Yes.
he knows Sally already?
Yeah, she's very hungry.
So that's that, really. Does anyone have any comments on the composition of charts or?
I think this composition matrix, based on the discussion tonight, would be helpful in setting a foundation for the very first topic when we talked about session planning, the bench, what we're looking for with the fruit, so on and so forth.
Going in state government, getting briefings, once the General Assembly bills have been filed. DEQ is working on regulatory changes. There's kind of periodic updates with help people, because that's really the state says what we need to know on an ongoing basis about the state.
Becky, we would like your input on other areas that. the else question in mind. It's a good list. It's great. It's great as is now.
So I ranked regulatory compliance number one because I felt that was like the closest to like environmental expertise, but it's not necessarily exactly the same thing. It was close enough. But you know, the kind of like affordability and weight design issues were, I don't think are captured by any of these categories. And I think those are the only ones.
Also, we may want to go for them to slide.
Right, right. Yeah, there were, it was actually hard to,
You know,
hard
it's
to
not gonna
choose.
sound like, is this 4, is this 5, or
Right.
do I leave this one off? And
Like, there were some definite ones where I was like, I don't know anything about that. So like under, you know, I'm never gonna rank that, but I could have probably put 7 or 8 of these in my areas of expertise.
say the same thing.
So it may not be as representative as you think it.
So I used to oversee 10 years in the city's IT department.
Oh,
So.
okay, cancel the
But I-
IT.
so well, that was a while back, and IT changed so quickly, I didn't put that down, but.
We just rank them based on what we've got. Right, the next time we do this, just rank them, one through 10, 1 through however they're on the page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some expertise.
I'm gonna leave the blanket and everything.
Just to get you thinking in a different direction. Oops. You know, Becky said, why? What's the why? And I think when you think about a 5-member board, gotta ask you why question. What skills do you need to guide the organization? In my mind, I was convinced, what relationships do you have? I always felt, you know, I've been very much involved in working with city council for before. We always have to have somebody who represents the city. Right now, we're fortunate to have Mark. For him, there was Bruce. Or Kerry, and there was Bruce before him, and Ed Simonian before him. Got to have someone who represents the business, you know, the environmental business. Becky, that's you. Yeah, you've got to have somebody who understands engineering, and that's sort of Jim and now also. And you've got to have connections to the civic association. I previously had sort of Bill and Jim to some extent, me now to increasing extent. You sort of need that, but, right? You know, associations, better than city government, you got to know the business, you got to know engineering. 5-member board, you've got to be very judicious on how you put those teams together on campus.
A small board.
Small stuff. Like Mark's idea, maybe a single purpose outreach committee, whatever we put in call that. Communication. That maybe only meets once or twice a year, but really could give us some different perspective. It could be a kind of growing organization. Could be a committee of the board, or it could be an advisory committee staff. Pros and cons, problems, problems.
Advisory committee of one board.
I mean, I watched how you operate as a team. It's really beautiful. You know, really drill down on the projects. You run all of the PFAS and regulations. Mark, you know, the finances, the investments, and also city. So it's kind of a nice model. That's one way to think of it. It might be a little more focused than this. This is important. Like, only got and by 5 players on the field. Who's carrying this? Who's carrying that?
This may be more useful for an issue, but staff, no, we might be able to provide input, or feedback, or become someone comes to the issue. And, okay, got 15 board members, will work, double work with staff. But I would agree, it's kind of more broad, it's staff, and it's like,
focusing.
Well, we have this week. Chairman.
So,
Well, we have.
Got two more items.
stakeholder matrix, so I'm not sure we both talked about some of it.
Talk about the acting. Let's move
Are you
on.
sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we're good. Let's move on to board retreat, please.
Oh, you want? Or people?
Governance teams.
So last year we did our strategic plan. We're doing those every 5 years, so that'll be a repeating theme for board retreats. And this year we're focused on looking at rate design and our rate structure and discussing that at a board retreat. Mainly that felt like we were kind of driving that as a staff initiative for the rate piece. And didn't want to get ahead of the board, and for the next few years, maybe wanting to put up some ideas that have come up. One, through our strategic planning session last year, and then also throughout the year, what we've heard feedback from the board on, and kind of talk about different themes that we thought might be beneficial for the board's annual retreat. You know, this again, this can be coupled or decoupled with the team building event. It doesn't necessarily have to have it, but we came up with really 5 major ideas. And one was having sort of a regulatory compliance forum where we would have members of EPA, DEQ come in here and discuss permit compliance, permit writing, what's on the horizon for each of the various regulatory bodies and what are upcoming regulatory requirements they might be seeing. The second was an idea around community coalition building. And this the discussion was kind of going there tonight with how do we best act as a conduit to the community as a board and act on that conduit through coalition building to advance our mission. This third one was more staff focused with community engagement, looking at having a larger discussion on what we talked about tonight. Are we really pointing in the right direction for engaging the community with our current tactics, and are we engaging the right groups? So we had that discussion a bit this evening as well. Last year, we talked about circular water economy. How do we further support a circular water economy? Through recovering our resources like clean water, our biosolids beneficially reused as land application, or if we look at that as a biofuel and energy. And then resiliency strengthening. This was looking at climate change, cybersecurity, wrote this around the time of the hurricanes, so disaster recovery was on top of mind at the time. Contingency planning and risk management. None of us knew how to navigate the Virginia warning system, to provide relief to North Carolina and some other areas. So it's something we're all learning how that works now because, I need to use it. So
We would add what you discussed earlier, the development plans for and for succession planning as the topic.
And I think we are making, we haven't talked about this at a board meeting yet, but we are starting to make tiny headway on more regional partnerships that I don't think have existed here in the last 50 years. Regionally trying to solve problems, and it might be a good idea to get the regional leaders together and maybe some of their board members have like a collaborative sort of board leadership thing. I'm still awful. But the other idea was looking, Amanda, you can take some of the ideas we had for team building exercises.
And this is the vote for is something you mentioned when we did our and that, I think that is on topic. It's, we looked at working with some of our stakeholder groups and going out together, some of the NGOs, maybe, but on our own, but doing the water quality sampling, so it'll be fun. And, I'll work in some governance meetings on the stuffing. The stream cleanup is something that, that Justin already mentioned, that we've adopted those streams. We're gonna be doing more volunteer activities, and so we could, once we get going there, so this would be the retreat. We already signed up for team building for the February retreat, or would you provide this for that one?
No, we're booked up February.
Okay, so this would be the follow-up.
Yeah. I think the intent, we're gonna have another governance meeting in April. It'd be nice if we kind of standardize and if we set the agenda in April, what we want to do for the retreat that year.
Yep.
And what we want to pick for a group for doing team building throughout the year. And then we can move on from there. At least that gives us, April, gives us the better part of the year to prep for the retreat. We've been preparing for this retreat for about, I'd say, 6 months already to involve around 2 people. But it gives us the ability to make sure we have our productive meeting. We're not wasting time. We're prepared. So maybe in April on the agenda, we'll have let's select the retreat thing and what we'll do for team building. Maybe the governance committee can assign what conferences go. There's actually to your request. But in the meantime, I think we can also keep thinking about this.
Now, the affinity groups, whatever you call it,
Yeah.
clusters. Yeah.
Pretty good.
When do we explore that?
So what will we initially had a presentation in December, and the December presentation was going to focus on our sort of outwardly facing events for over the next year. Kind of last half of FY25 to the first half of FY26. I think what we can do with that one is at least introduce the ideas of the groups are and how we engage them as well. That you have, as a board member, you have that at least foundation to be able to, to talk about community engagement. Maybe we revisit the community engagement piece at a larger retreat and say, are these the right groups? Are we using the right channels to communicate with them? And we could do that at a retreat, in January next year.
January 25, 26.
26. We got off the August. They used to be in August.
Yeah.
So, but maybe go back. Retreats used to be in August, but they're on board. The way the timing worked out last year, it got pushed to, I think we were waiting for the new board member, was one, and then it just got pushed to February, so that pushed it again, January, so it pushed February this year, just to meet any schedule for the retreat.
So we came up with no meetings in August to give staff.
But that, it felt really weird, to be honest.
Hmm?
Not having a board meeting always felt very strange.
Okay, good.
Very good.
But they worried the whole time.
I wish August schedules are hard, like not everybody goes on vacation in
I
August.
agree with that. I think let's,
So we'll keep them in.
Like council's off in August, like everybody's off.
everybody's get out of town, it's gets hot.
Well, we're not waiting on that piece though, just to circle back on the community outreach and coming up with, the matrix.
And we
Like
have
this would be a thing that we may, once we start going down a path, we may revisit it if we want that meeting, but we're not gonna wait until January 2026 to.
That's all I care about is that we somehow keep that percolating.
Yeah.
Because I think Paul decided that giving everybody a civic association to go to is,
I've actually been doing it for 10 years either. I don't know if it's actually been happening
it hasn't been happening in any.
in a very long time.
And COVID knocked it out. A whole bunch of things. I think that's one of the reasons not the best use of money.
It's like when you go to a civic association meeting, there aren't other people from similar, utilities or organizations there. Like, so it's weird that like we were the only one. If it was a page that different representatives went to, it would make more sense to me.
I think
one of the main reasons we started out was because we were working. And both the effect it would have on town.
Yeah.
And the effect it was gonna have on rates. And projects like that, whenever the Commonwealth Interceptor is built, we're gonna want to be engaged
Yes.
pretty regularly with Delaware.
Yes, but
So we don't need to talk to Seminary Hill.
Right, right.
It's just,
That was, our whole conversation about how it should be like, what's the purpose? So
Major project.
purpose driven.
Really. Community. We're engaging in planning,
Right,
Yes.
right.
so that this was going to be big and going to be different, therefore. And each of those plans, it will be different.
Yeah, yeah.
Depending
Yeah.
on which communities, what the issue is, where we see the fine field.
so all I care about is we're gonna keep this whole affinity discussion.
December. In December.
As long as we
And then
keep
if there's feedback
chipping
from the
away.
board, we'll continue, we'll do like we did with, everything else, we'll circle back on it the next meeting. Because we feel like we're ready to play.
I think there's one more agenda item.
so, yes,
We have,
Uh-oh.
we just put the idea on here, we don't need to have a discussion tonight, but planning C. And maybe we talk more about this in April, but the idea of having a paperless meeting.
All meetings paperless or atypical?
Yes, not just one.
We'll try it out. Having paperless meetings, we can give you iPad, or you can use a computer or whatever works digitally, but just planning C, we don't need that perspective. We can use Board Source for all the document management and it's easy, well,
No, I think we're killing a lot of trees. We killed a lot of trees. So I'd be totally open to some, let's start with a hybrid.
Could we present like an idea of what it would look like?
Yeah.
Oh,
I just think there's some things that are.
That's what I mean.
Age that are, would like to, bylaws. You want to look at the front, you want to look at the back, you want to put it next to each other. It's we have a discussion rather than like flipping screen. Looking for it. So I think there are some things.
you have this, and you've got the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm same generations.
Could be maybe like printing specific pieces on request would really cut down on the paper.
I think the PowerPoints don't probably do things. I think we got those electronic.
I agree.
I think even if you want to print it out, it's going to go.
No, I think things like agendas and decision documents that have a lot of text, sure, they should be printed. But this sort of stuff. That's good. Anyway, think about
Yeah.
But
Curious
let's-
to hear your.
it. Yeah.
Here's some example boards that run paper.
Oh, I know.
Oh.
And-
You're gonna shame us.
Could we try one meeting tables just to see what it looks like?
Let's present an option, of what it would look
Yeah.
like. And then, we'll get feedback. And then we'll try it. And then if there's one.
I think we all agree with print way too much. Question is, go to zero, or go to 20%?
And then one last item that came up during prep meeting earlier is we can only have one member right now for finance and audit. Finance and audit has to make a recommendation to the board on November 12th to accept the act for an audit. As well as looked up the Robert's rules when we sat down and we found out that
Ex officio can vote and council towards the board.
so we should be good, and then Dr. Juan will be appointed at the next board meeting after.
Ex officio does not mean I can't vote.
Just wanted to make sure that was confirmed, so we.
It's very often it's confused. Lots of organizations. Well, that means you can't vote. No, it means you're there by your official position, period. And
We
then
could do
some
something.
places say,
now.
Just want to make sure.
other than the summary of what we talked about, you need to bring anything to the middle.
That's still done, but
In terms of reporting and.
we should report publicly at the meeting of what we discussed, and then we can write some abbreviated minutes, that point, or like a, well,
Just a summary of the action items evenly.
What else we people action?
Actions, what are the actions? What are we going to do differently? Putting the C-shaped tables.
Fancy table,
No, just move these.
budget item, fancy table.
we get the dividers back in there, how the dividers, it's clear dividers.
They were
Oh, was this a coded thing?
spit
Oh,
shields.
the air doesn't go around.
Doesn't.
Right.
Yeah, it was,
Makes a lot of
it was
sense.
literally like.
What a time, what a time.
It was weird, it was weird. Anything else? Folks?
To adjourn. Hi.
Yeah, I'm gonna give
Good
kudos.
meeting.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
By the way, I've got to give kudos. That